CBS Sports College Basketball Podcast, where we sometimes discuss camel fighting dodo birds. Leaky Black, the Iron College Basketball Podcast presented by Jersey Mike's, proud sponsor of the Naismith Award. Jersey Mike's would like to offer their congratulations to all the athletes who made the watch list. David Cobb is here with me. If you're watching on YouTube, there's only one way to honor Brandon Davies. You must smash the like button. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the Iron College Basketball Podcast, please do that wherever you subscribe to pods like Apple and Spotify. Let's get into it. It's been 4 days now since Michigan won the 2026 NCAA tournament, 69-63 victory over UConn. Since then, I have traveled home. Since then, David Cobb has traveled home. And since then, the Wolverines have bolstered their front court that is definitely losing one starter, probably losing two, and could lose all three. We'll get to that in a moment. But the headline on this morning is that Michigan has secured a commitment from Tennessee transfer JP Estrella. David Cobb, good to see you on this Friday morning. Dusty May and his staff have turned transfer bigs into first-round picks in consecutive years with Danny Wolf and at least a Daimara. Is JP Estrella, is he going to be the first? I mean, the next. And by first, I mean next.
Yes, it's crazy because Tennessee's last game of the season, JP Estrella's last game as a volunteer, came against these Michigan Wolverines. And I'm going to venture to guess it wasn't his performance in that game that switched the light bulb on for Michigan staff. I'm going to guess they had already done their advanced work on JP Estrella before that meeting, because if that game was all you're going off of and you're a Michigan fan and you're like, wait, that guy, that's the one we're bringing in to replace this convoy of bigs, I'd be a little underwhelmed. But if you look at the body of work, GP, I actually think JP Estrella compares pretty nicely to Merez Johnson Jr. in the way he plays, right? Because you look at Yaxel, you look at Merez, you look at Daimara, you're like, all right, which of these players does JP Estrella profile the most closely to? It definitely is not Yaxel. Definitely not Yaxel. And I don't think it's a Daimara either, because JP Estrella has not shown that elite like paint protection sort of ability. Now, granted, a lot of times he was playing next to Felix Okpara at Tennessee, and Okpara was that elite rim protector. So JP Estrella was more off the ball in terms of being, he wasn't always defending the fives. He wasn't always the last line of defense there at the rim. But if you look at their offensive profiles, JP Estrella, 60% field goal shooter on post-ups, according to Synergy. That's pretty comparable to Merez Johnson Jr., 56.4% on post-ups, according to Synergy. And then at the rim, I think is where there's a little bit of a difference. Tennessee fans would tell you that JP Estrella was a little disappointing at times at the rim against some of the bigger opponents on Tennessee's schedule. He still shot a very respectable 60% at the rim, but Merez, almost 72% at the rim. So a little bit of a difference there, but JP Estrella is a really solid. 5 years ago, he would have been a 5, no questions asked, right? But in the way it's going now, the way Michigan likes to play, the way college basketball is structured, he's more of that 4 or 5. And assuming Michigan's going to play next season the way it played this past season, yeah, like you could start JP Estrella at the 4 and play more of that bully ball smash mouth style.
It seems like exactly what they did last year, which is identify role players from power conference programs that they can envision being something more. Like, they hit it across the board with those guys. I know Yaxel wasn't a role player, but he was a star at UAB in the American. But Elliot Cadeau was a guy at North Carolina. Merez Johnson was a guy at Illinois. Daimara was a guy at UCLA. None of them the guys at those schools. And yet they collectively came together to create undeniably the best basketball team in the country. And here's another example of them, I think, going down a similar path. He only averaged, JP Estrella, 10 points and 5.4 rebounds, but that comes in just 18.3 minutes per game. So the per minute stuff is actually pretty impressive. And so you're exactly right. They didn't make this. The transfer portal doesn't open. And then Dusty May's like, so, hey, guys, congrats again on the national championship. What are we doing about next year? Like, this was in the works. And then they executed it and got it done same way they did consistently last offseason in the transfer portal. And so I guess my next question for you is, does this tell us something about what the roster will look like next season in Ann Arbor? As you know, Yaxel Lindenborg is gone. he has exhausted his eligibility. That's the easy one. The more difficult ones are Adai Mara and Morez Johnson Jr. because they are both Mara, I think at this point is almost a lock to be a first-round pick. It's do you want him in the lottery or do you want him 25th? But he's going to be picked somewhere. And I think most people assume, and it's just an assumption, but assume he will be in the 2026 NBA draft. Morez Johnson, it's like you can look at one mock draft and he's 23. You can look at another one, he might be 36, right? And those are the type of prospects in this era of the sport where you could make a lot of money in college basketball. I can totally understand why if your options, your realistic options are maybe be picked in the 30s, maybe split time between an NBA franchise and a G League franchise. And even when you are in an NBA uniform, you're probably sitting at the end of the bench and making whatever you're making. You could make more money than that being a star college basketball player, charter flights, nice hotels, and you're on national TV every game. You're in sold out arenas basically every game. I could understand why you would say, I'll just come back to college then. So as always, I'll let these young men make their own decisions with the guidance of their families and agents. But I do have Michigan number one, and we'll perhaps keep them there no matter what these decisions are. But my current roster projection in the top 25-1 has Yaxel gone, Adai Mara gone, Mo Johnson back with Elliot Cadeau, LJ Kaysen, and Trey McKinney, giving Michigan 4 real rotation players back. Does this development, should I change that? If you were doing the top 25-1, would you say this commitment makes me assume they must think Morez Johnson is actually out the door?
Well, if Morez Johnson and Adai Mara are both gone and JP Estrella is like the guy down low for Michigan, I think you got to look at maybe moving them down. I don't think that's going to be the case. Now, could Morez Johnson and Adai Mara both go? Yes. And if that happens, then I think Michigan's in the market for a big who might even be better than JP Estrella. Now, JP Estrella ranks 21st in our CBS Sports 24/7 Sports transfer portal rankings. So he's among the more highly rated bigs so far in the portal. But you can't do what you did last year in terms of dominating teams on the interior if JP Estrella is the focal point of your front court. He doesn't have the length, the wingspan to have you the number one ranked defense at KenPom like Michigan had this past season. So if you get one of those guys back, I feel like JP Estrella is a really nice complementary piece to them. But if both of them leave, then you're back in the market for another big time stud. And then not to mention, like, how do you replace Yaxel? Because he was sort of the third member of that towering trio, but he played on the perimeter. They cast him more as a 3. Who is that guy in the portal this year? I don't see him yet. You know what I mean? Yaxel was one of one last year in terms of that archetype. So they're going to have to kind of shift and mold this thing a little bit because the guards you mentioned, Cadeau, McKinney, Kaysen, you know, they aren't that 6'9" sort of versatile Dominican LeBron archetype. So there's still some molding and shifting to be done here for Michigan, but it's very, very early. And just because guys aren't in the portal right now doesn't mean they won't be. And there's somebody out there maybe who could play that role for Michigan. They could still hit the portal. You know, this thing is going to be open now for a handful more days.
Well, that's the thing. And I'm not saying this about Michigan specifically, but Michigan as a brand, Michigan as a program, that is the type of place that can put people in the portal. In other words, there's a lot of different ways basketball players end up there. Sometimes it's because they're in search of more money. Sometimes it's because they're in search of more playing time. Sometimes it's because they got pushed there by their current staff. Sometimes it's because they got a phone call and said, hey, if you're happy, be happy where you're at. But, you know, if you got in that transfer portal, we could maybe make an offer that would convince you that you're not as happy at your current place as you thought you were. So Michigan is the type of, like Michigan, Duke, these big brands with big, you know, budgets. They're the types that can have somebody pick up the phone, get in touch with somebody and say, is your 6'8" wing at this place happy? Yeah, he's fine. Okay, but like, is he really happy? Could he be happier at this other thing? If so, you know, get him in there and we'll get him right out of there. So that's the type of thing that could go on as well. But either way, it does look like almost regardless of what happens between now and the beginning of next season, we will, heading into it, have very reasonable and realistic conversations about, just like we thought UConn had a chance to go back-to-back and then three-peat, and just like we thought this season Florida on paper looked like a team good enough to go back-to-back, we're going to head into next season, push back if you want, almost regardless of what happens between now and the opening day, thinking that Michigan's going to have at least a shot to be a back-to-back national champion. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, and then don't forget, too, I mean, their actual high school recruiting class is highly ranked. I mean, they've got a kid, 6'10" kid coming in who's a top 50 prospect. I mean, he could play minutes for him in the front court too.
Right.
Now, that's not something we saw from Michigan this past season. We didn't see true freshman contributors for the Wolverines on any significant level whatsoever. I mean, that could change this next year if they've nailed these evaluations on a very, very highly ranked freshman class. So that's the other element to remember here. They don't have as many spots to fill as you might think, because they do have a nice freshman class coming in as well. GP.
Cobb, I fear we've lost GP for the time being. We'll see. We'll work on getting him here. I'll jump in for the time being until I see his statues start to move around again. Let me ask you this, Cobb. Starting with JP Estrella, what are you expecting in the next, I don't know, few days, couple weeks, even the next couple months to happen for Michigan as they start to piece together this reload? Well,
First off, getting Elliot Cadeau back, massive. And now I think we got GP back, which is also massive.
There's the GP. We found GP.
But my point was basically just like Cadeau.
Apparently we're having Wi-Fi problems here at FedEx Forum. I hope to God LeBron doesn't hear about this.
When did you move to Indiana? That's what I'm wondering.
I apparently I live in Bloomington now. I just got back from Indiana. Now I'm back in the I'm back at FedEx Forum, and I hope to God LeBron doesn't hear about our sometimes spotty Wi-Fi at FedEx Forum. I can't bear. I can't take another stray from LeBron James this week.
GP, they have never had Wi-Fi issues in Nashville. They've never had them. It's amazing.
Yes, that's
They've
right.
never had Wi-Fi issues in Nashville.
Nashville has the most beautiful hotels and the most perfect Wi-Fi.
And they also just rip off, there's a Central Barbecue in Nashville now? Like, that's upsetting to me. That's upsetting. That's upsetting to me.
But we have a Hattie's B. We have a Hattie B's here in Memphis, so I think it's all fair.
And when Gus is in Nashville too, and I'm like, is there no loyalty anymore in the world?
I think franchising trumps loyalty. I think that's the world we live in. Franchising trumps loyalty. I was actually at the original, true story, Gus's Fried Chicken in Mason, Tennessee, the day that they were signing the contract to franchise Gus's. I would just coincidentally, and I was like, so what's going on? And they were like, we're about to take I think the next one they built was in downtown Memphis. And now they're all over the place. I think they're in Texas and, throughout, they're all over the place. But yeah, Gus's Fried Chicken, it's a franchising trumps loyalty. I think that's the way I was trying to answer your question. Anyway, I'm back. I'm on a personal hot spot now. So we'll see how this goes the rest of the way. Did you and Josh wrap up this Michigan conversation? Y'all got everything settled there?
More or less. Like, I was just commenting briefly on the significance of getting Elliot Cadeau back. I mean, when you get the Final Four's most outstanding player returning, not that there was a viable NBA alternative for Elliot Cadeau, but nonetheless, at a point in the calendar where a lot of teams are still massively in flux, it does feel like Michigan has more of its structure in place. Now, obviously, the Mara and the Murez Johnson questions continue to loom. But in some way, they've already begun to backfill there with Estrella. And then you've got the backcourt, which is in great shape with Cadeau and Kaysen and McKinney. So, I think you're well justified for the time being, GP, and having the Wolverines at number one.
All right, let's move on. Interesting developments at Kansas since the end of the season. First and foremost, Bill Self announced that he is returning to KU. He will be the coach of the Jayhawks for the 2026-27 season. And then just about everybody who was involved in KU's program last season has subsequently announced they ain't going to be there for Bill Self's next season. I'll get David Cobb's thoughts on that next. First, let's get a word from our partners.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ hits every highlight from all the sports that matter to you.
JJ, we appreciate your time breaking it down.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With the plays you missed.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And analysis to give you an edge.
All we need is 20 points.
I was shaking in my boots.
Texas, Ohio State, who wins this game?
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, streaming free 24/7.
All right, Bill Self has announced that he is returning for another season at Kansas after there was some speculation, I guess, that he might retire. Subsequently, basically everybody who played for Kansas this season has said, we ain't playing for Kansas next season. Top 6 scorers, all gone. Leading returning scorer now projects as Cole Rosario, 3.4 points in 11.6 minutes per game. Cobb, KU does have a top 5 recruiting class on the way, but still, I think we can all agree, and I think Bill Self would even co-sign it, this isn't ideal to be losing this much of your roster year over year. Should KU fans be concerned?
Well, sure. Sure you should be concerned. Absolutely. You're coming off 4 straight first weekend exits. Your entire roster's basically departing. Your freshman class, as you mentioned, it's highly ranked, but this is not like you got 5 McDonald's All-Americans coming in. I mean, Taylor Kenny is very highly ranked as a guard, and he should be the type of guy that will be among the better freshmen in college basketball next season. But after that, you don't have another top 50 guy. So you've got 4 players in that freshman class signed, but what's the realistic impact you expect from that class in this era? I would say relatively minimal. Now, on the flip side of this, outside of Flory Badunga and maybe Bryson Tiller, I mean, are you just totally devastated about the other guys who are leaving? I mean, I think the Elmarco Jackson, Jamari McDowell sort of depth piece in the backcourt, like those two had sort of run their course and hit their ceiling. And, so it's not like outside of Badunga, these aren't devastating departures necessarily, but it does sort of make you realize like the fact that this Kansas program is just operating at a different level. Because you might have thought Bill Self recommits, he's not retiring. Tyron Stokes is going to commit ASAP. As soon as he gets that information, we're good, but we're still waiting. Kentucky seems to be firmly in the mix there as well. So it's crazy, man. Like you look at the 4 programs or the 7 programs in college basketball who have won 4 or more national titles outside of UConn, who is still dominating college basketball. Like these other programs with the proud histories are kind of on the struggle bus right now. I mean, UNC, consecutive first round exits. Kentucky hadn't been past the Sweet 16 since 19. Duke in the midst of its longest national title drought since Coach K won his first. Indiana's missed 7 of the last 9 NCAA tournaments. UCLA, 2 NCAA tournament victories in the last 3 years. And now Kansas is a part of that conversation. I mean, like I mentioned, 4 straight first weekend exits, and now you got a roster that you pretty much have to reconstruct fully here through the portal. So, yeah, plenty of reason to be concerned.
I think it's just a reminder, too, that the brands, I don't want to say they don't matter. Like the Duke brand still matters, and the Kentucky brand still matters, but they don't matter as much as they used to. And they're not a needle mover in any sort of meaningful way. In other words, there was a time where Duke might offer let's just for the sake of the conversation, assume everything was above board. I don't want to tell a hypothetical and then somebody say, well, you know what they really did? Like, I got you. All right. But just for the sake of the conversation, Duke could offer a scholarship to somebody, and a different school in a power conference, but a middle of the pack school in a power conference, certainly not a blue blood brand like Duke, might tell the same prospect, we'll give you a scholarship, and we'll also give your brother a scholarship, and we'll try to do a package deal to get this done. And a certain person might say, you know what, I'll just go to Duke anyway. I don't need the whole package. Like, you might pick the brand over what is theoretically a more lucrative situation for you and your family. But I don't know how true that is anymore. Right now, if you're a point guard and you're in the portal and one of the biggest brands in the country is offering you $2 million and a different brand is offering you $2.8 million, you're probably going to take the $2.8 million because that's what most normal people do. That $800,000 in 1 year is a big difference when you're talking about, a $2 million to $3 million salary, for lack of a better term. So whereas you would look at some of the best players in the country in years past, different eras, and you could sort of reasonably assume, well, I guess that guy's either going to Duke or Kentucky or here, or maybe his local university that's got some local ties. But outside of that, you could always assume with in some sort of certainty that these types of schools were going to get these types of players. And now these types of players will go anywhere. We just lived through a season where AJ DeBonsa was at BYU. He grew up in New England. In a different era, he is playing at UConn or Kentucky or Duke, something like that. He went to BYU. And so the advantages that used to be there for a Bill Self or, other coaches at these other big brands, they're just not there in the same types of ways anymore. And the job's harder. Like I've heard Rick Barnes recently say he thinks the job is easier now because at a place like Tennessee, he's got the resources. You don't have to spend years recruiting now. And the playing field's been a little leveled and can be leveled by money. And so he's enjoying coaching in this era. I don't want to put mouth, but that's more or less the sentiment. And I think you can reasonably argue Bill Self's job has gotten harder because for a variety of reasons, but Kansas is not the destination right now that it once was. And assuming we're going to look up and that's going to be a preseason top 25 team, but we used to always look up and you didn't even have to think about it. And right now, looking at the current roster as constructed, you kind of would have to think about it.
Do you have Kansas right now in your top 25?
I do have them in the 20s, but some of that is just out of respect for the program and Bill Self and like that. I just assume Kansas is going to be one of the 25 best teams in the country. Some of it's just out of respect for that. But if I'm being honest, if you took the name Kansas and the name Bill Self and just said, GP, this is the roster right now, April 10th, 10:24 a.m. Eastern, this is the KU roster right now. Is that a top 25 roster in the country? I don't know. I mean, they barely
Cole Rosario. He's carrying a lot of weight in that on that roster right now.
You got a point guard in Cole Rosario. I mean, you got a 5-star point guard in Cole Rosario. Now, I'm assuming the roster is going to improve, obviously, but is it going to improve enough to where we are sitting here going, oh yeah, Kansas looks like it could go back to another Final Four? In fact, let me ask you a question I was asked yesterday on radio in Kansas City. Sarim Petro, I do a weekly spot with him during the season, and he asked me, yes or no, Bill Self will coach in a Final Four again. What would you say? How would you answer that?
I would tend to lean yes. I rattled off the shortcomings of the last 5-6 years of these programs that have won 4+ national titles, but we are still seeing high level success from these programs. Now, it's not the wholesale dominance that it used to be, but they are still on the aggregate having pretty high level success. And so I do think Kansas could get back. Do I think Kansas will ever get back to where it was 6-7 years ago, pre-COVID Kansas dominating the Big 12, a 1, 2, or 3 seed every single year? I don't think we're ever going to get back to that. Now, could there be a single season where Kansas cycles up to that level? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think it's going to be the metronome just year after year after year after year where you just ride them in. I think we're past that. It's been demonstrated. The arrival of Arizona, the arrival of Houston, the staying power of Iowa State, along with the retention of TJ Otzelberger, it's really changed the landscape that Kansas competes against and made it a lot more difficult. And so, I think he'll get back there as long as he wants to continue coaching. And he's coming back, right? Does he coach until his 70s? Like Kelvin Sampson, Rick Barnes, some of these other guys who are operating at such a high level. I think there's a huge question mark around that. I mean, I don't think anybody can deny the sense of curiosity over how much longer Bill Self has the appetite to keep going. But for as long as he does, I would have to imagine Kansas is going to be right there in the mix. And this past season, the ingredients were in place, and they had their moments and their flashes of, like, you could see it, and things didn't really pan out the way everybody hoped they would with Darren Peterson. But if you keep getting bites at the apple with talent of that caliber, with the talent that they had around Darren Peterson this year, I would say the odds are in his favor that he gets back to the Final Four.
Yeah, I think that's more or less the way I answered it. I said, but tell me how long he's going to coach. Like, are we really doing 1 or 2 more years? Then I guess from a probabilities perspective, based on the current roster, and then maybe you only get another year after that, then I guess the smart play would be no. But if you tell me he's going to coach into his 70s, I think then it shifts to probably just because he's Bill Self and that's Kansas, and at some point it would click. But right now, I think all of that is up in the air. Either way, in the short term, they've got to add players, preferably high level players that make it where when you and I look at the roster, we're not debating whether Kansas should be in the top 25 and 1. Right now, it is kind of a debate. I have them in there, but you could certainly reasonably leave them out. I suspect the roster will be in a place where we remove that question from the conversation. Like, it'll look like a top 25 team heading into things, but is it going to look the way we thought it was going to look even as recently as a week ago? Probably not. There's been a lot of players going from Lawrence, Kansas, straight into the transfer portal. We'll see who they pull out of it in the coming hours and days and weeks and whatever. We come back. I do want to get Cobb's thoughts on Michael Malone being introduced as the head coach at North Carolina. This obviously broke on Monday. Then we had the national championship game on Monday night. Norlander and I podcasted after the game, but we were focused on Michigan and UConn then. Didn't really have time to deal with Michael Malone. Since then, he has been introduced in Chapel Hill. It feels like the reaction to this is moving a little bit. The initial reaction seemed to be, what? And now people are starting to kind of talk themselves into it. I'll get Cobb's thoughts next. First, let's get another word from our partners.
You think you understand how this business works, but you don't.
I now know why Mommy was so stressed.
What's the plan here?
Landman. New season now streaming only on Paramount Plus.
All right, Cobb, as we were getting ready for the Final Four, it was a lot of conversations about, is Tommy Lloyd at Arizona going to be the next head coach at North Carolina? He announced a week ago today that he's not going to be. He's staying at Arizona. There was also some interest in Dusty May, reportedly reached out to Ben McCollum at Iowa, eventually hired Michael Malone, the former NBA coach, who, of course, won a championship 3 years ago with Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. My initial reaction to this was, okay, if you'd asked me a month ago who's going to be the next head coach at North Carolina if Hubert Davis is pushed out, I don't think I would have spit Michael Malone off of the top of my head. But I can make sense of this. North Carolina has somebody whose job it will be to secure a roster, buy players. As long as the program is well funded, and it should be, then you're handing a basketball team to a guy who can clearly coach basketball. I can wrap my head around the idea of this actually works, and not just works okay, but works well. Where are you at on Michael Malone, head coach, North Carolina Tar Heels?
Did it feel a little random? Yeah, sure. It felt a little random in the moment. I'm of the opinion that among high school prospects and players in the portal, players of the 17 to 22-year-old age group, Michael Malone might be a more visible, attractive coach to play for than Billy Donovan. I know people our age probably think that's wild because we remember Billy Donovan winning consecutive titles with Florida, but players of 17 to 22-year-old age range, they don't remember Billy Donovan winning back-to-back titles at Florida. They remember Michael Malone and Nikola Jokic winning an NBA championship at Denver 3 years ago, though. So in terms of like an NBA coach who's going to resonate with college talent, I actually think Michael Malone checks that box in a more significant way than Billy Donovan. And let's not pretend like he has no college experience. Sure, has the game changed in a quarter century since he was in college basketball? Yeah, absolutely. But it had changed a whole lot too since Billy Donovan left. So if you're doing the, it could have been Billy thing, I actually think Michael Malone maybe checks more of the boxes and can work out better in terms of a guy who you were going to bring in from the NBA coaching ranks. So I'm reasonably optimistic on this, especially if Henry Visar comes back. I mean, we've seen Michael Malone build a championship level roster around a Eastern European big man before. So it would be exciting to kind of theorize about the possibilities of him doing that again. Now, I do think they overpaid a little bit. I mean, the top 5 level salary, the 80% owed on any buyout, that seems like a little bit of an overcommitment financially. Because in the moment, you're like, all right, this is great because they don't have to pay a $10 million buyout on a sitting college coach. And maybe they can save a little bit of coin there and then use that to fund the roster, right? And the wheels are spinning on that. And it's like, oh, man, then you get the details of the contract. And it's like, wow, they really went all in on this. So, I mean, I get the complaint there. But, I mean, look, like of their top 5 players from Evan Mia's BPR ranking this past season, 3 of them are not in the portal right now. So, like, obviously, Caleb Wilson has gone to the draft, we assume. Seth Trimble is out of eligibility. But Visar was their top guy in terms of efficiency. And then Jaron Stevenson was 3rd. Luka Bogovac was 5th. We've not seen any indication that any of the 3 of those players are leaving. And so you could have a nice returning nucleus there, actually, if those 3 guys were to be retained. Now, we still got a long way to go before that's set in stone, but potentially you could have the building blocks there for Michael Malone's first roster.
Yeah, I mean, I've got him 18th in the top 25-1 right now based off of those 3 players returning. And as I write, this ranking is based on the Tar Heels returning 3 of the top 5 scorers from a team that advanced to the first round of the 2026 NCAA tournament. I'll just keep it simple. Like, obviously, you know, as always, we'll see. I've been doing this long enough where I've watched coaching hires happen that I thought would work brilliantly, and it just didn't. I've seen some that I thought would be disasters, and they just weren't. So no way to know for sure, but just on paper, this makes sense to me. Like, I'll just ask some very simple questions. Is North Carolina going to fund its men's basketball program at an elite level? If it hasn't, I think it will moving forward because it knows it has to, right? Like, you could guess over the past few years, if you want, where this thing is going, how it's going to work, what's important, what isn't. We're not guessing anymore. It's money. Money drives all of this stuff. They're going to have to fund it. I assume that they will. Are they going to have somebody whose job it is to secure players? Yes. I can't tell you whether they'll be good at it, but if they are, then you're just handing over a lucrative, a big salaried roster with theoretically talented basketball players to a guy who can clearly coach. What's the problem? Why would that not work? Other than for the reason sometimes just things don't work. But like, that should work. If everybody involved does their job well, this should work just fine. And as for what they're paying him, I was a little surprised the numbers are that high, but I understand how you get there. It's who knows how many NBA jobs are about to open. He will, at least in theory, be a candidate for every one, or at least he'll be reported as a candidate for every one. Somebody will float his name for all of them. All right. So if you're North Carolina and he's showing any hesitation whatsoever, this isn't a guy who has to take your job or he doesn't know what he's going to do tomorrow. He doesn't need the money, I assume. He can get another job somewhere else, I assume. And he can hold all of that over your head in negotiations. And, oh, by the way, the transfer portal is about to open. So, like, hey, do we really want to pay this much money for this particular coach? No. But a minute ago, we were going to try to hire Tommy Lloyd, and we're going to have to pay X amount of dollars in a buyout. We get to avoid that now. So if you, and this is the way if any of us who have ever made big purchases, like, you start wrapping your head around, you know, when you think about it this way. And so I guarantee you somebody said, well, when you think about it this way, we're saving all this buyout money. So it's not that big of a deal if we throw a little extra here to get this done, because big picture, we're still saving money relative to what we thought we were going to be spending a week ago when we thought we were maybe getting the Arizona coach. And so that's how you wrap your mind around it, I think. And you just get it done, and then you hope for the best. But if the school can keep just those 3 and then supplement the roster around them, I think we'll look up and Michael Malone will have a top 25 team competing with Duke and Virginia and whatever else at or near the top of the ACC next season. I am not nearly as out on this as so many other people seem to be initially.
Yeah, I think he's made some nice moves too in retaining Sean May, Pat Sullivan, Eric Hoots, these guys who are Carolina through and through. Because this is a little bit of a culture shock for a program that has operated within its family for generations now, to go to somebody outside that family. And I get it, his daughter plays volleyball there, but let's not pretend like Michael Malone has some illustrious history in the powder blue. So to retain those guys,
he's been there some, just like I've been there some. They're not much difference other than his daughter is an accomplished volleyball player there. So he does have that connection. I know he's been around the campus, but yeah, he's certainly, this is not in the family hire. Nobody's suggesting otherwise.
Yeah. And then the Chuck Martin hire from John Calipari's staff at Arkansas is a nice hire, because this is sort of a college basketball lifer. He's been a college basketball head coach. Now, he did have a brief stint as an NBA scout. I think that's a plus for him, but somebody who has the relationships throughout the sport, somebody who helped John Calipari acquire talent, somebody who's been dialed in on the portal and player acquisition for months now, albeit at a previous institution, but one that competes for the similar type of player as North Carolina will be competing for here over the next few weeks. So I think that's brilliant as well. I mean, my one kind of concern on Michael Malone is like, all right, how dialed in on college basketball have you been? Like, you've been an NBA analyst, you've been an NBA head coach, like you've been out of coaching. So you have to have help navigating the intricacies of this sport when there are 1,500 plus players available in the portal. Like, that is an overwhelming amount of talent to sift through and to sort through. And somebody like Chuck Martin can help with that. And so that's the key is having help with constructing the roster. Because if he has that and you give Michael Malone a top 20 roster, I'm of the opinion that this guy was a successful NBA head coach for over a decade. And I know people want to do here was his record without Nikola Jokic, but sure, like Denver was constructed specifically tailored to thrive around Nikola Jokic. Like, is it any shock that they had a worse record when he didn't play? No, just the same as it won't be any shock if they center this next roster around Henry Visar and struggle a little bit in the games where Henry Visar may not be available, right? Like, that's just how basketball works. So I don't really look at that as any significant ding. I'll say this, the one player who I would love for North Carolina's sake to come back is like a Derek Dixon. He's in the portal. He had a nice freshman season. I was in the building in Rupp when he hit some big shots down the stretch as a true freshman 2 months into his career to help them get a big win there. And it's like, I hate seeing that guy get in the portal for UNC's sake. But yeah, I'm bullish on this. You know, people want to liken it to Bill Belichick, like the guy who flamed out at the professional ranks, who UNC takes an unnecessarily big swing on. And I guess on the surface, like, I get the comp, but to me, I've made this comparison. I think it resonates more closely to like Pete Carroll going to USC after he got fired in New England, 25 years ago. And he goes to USC. It took him a year to get his feet beneath him, but boy, the best years of USC football in this century ensued after they rolled the dice on a guy who the professional game had decided it was done with. And so I don't know if Michael Malone has like that high level leadership thinking that we associate with Pete Carroll, but from a schematic perspective, I think he absolutely can come in and you give this guy a decent roster. I think he can coach him up.
It's just way easier to flip it in basketball than it is football anyway. I mean, in basketball, you can do it with one recruiting class. And by one recruiting class, I mean 4 guys. Like, you can't flip a college football program with 4 guys. You can flip a college basketball program with 4 guys. I mean, Michigan just did it. Last off, you can flip the whole thing with 2 weeks of good work and lots of money. And so it might be a disaster like Belichick, or could go brilliantly like Pete Carroll. Like, again, I have guesses, but we all just have guesses. We'll let it play out, but I would bet on it working. A well-funded program with a high-level NBA, like Wally Zerbiak. When this broke, I was with Wally. We were at the Final Four. Wally was like, he was my assistant coach in Cleveland when we won 66 games and I played with LeBron. He's awesome. Like, really knows his stuff. Like, Wally played for a lot of coaches over a lot of years in the NBA. Trust me, he doesn't say they were all awesome. There are some he's like, oh, that guy didn't know what he was doing, right? Unprompted, he was like, Michael Malone is a great basketball coach. All right. So North Carolina just hired a great basketball coach. And now if North Carolina can get him great basketball players, I assume it'll go. I'm assuming it'll go well. And the other thing, he's 54 years old. He's younger than you think. Like, and particularly in college basketball, he's 54 years old. Like he's not an old man. And in college basketball, like he's actually on the younger side. So he's one of the more accomplished, under 55 coaches in college basketball immediately. And I do think having somebody like Chuck on staff, and then we'll get out of here, is important, but not from a coaching basketball perspective. I think once you get them in the gym, now it's just a basketball team. You can coach high school, NBA, anything in between. You're just coaching basketball. Where I think having somebody like Chuck is helpful when you haven't been on a college campus in like a quarter century in any sort of meaningful way is like just to ask very basic questions. Like, so when you guys travel to Clemson, how do you do that? All right. Like, hey, when you go here, where do you stay? Hey, if you've got finals weeks, how do you guys handle that? Like just the very just somebody right there who's, I've known Chuck forever. He's been a bunch of different programs, different parts of the country, worked for different men. Like there's nothing you're going to be able to put in front of him that he can't say, oh yeah, we dealt with that before. Hey, eligibility issue. Oh yeah, I've dealt with that before. Compliance is being tough on me about this one. How do you handle that? Yeah. We had a situation like that back at wherever. Like there's nothing you're going to put in front of him that he hasn't seen that he can't be helpful with. And I think if you are sort of parachuting in from a different world into college athletics, you don't have to have that institutional knowledge of how it all works, but it is helpful to have somebody around you who does. And I think that was smart to get somebody like that on his staff immediately, just to stand next to him. And, even, hey, we're going to Peach Jam. Where do you park? It's just stuff like that. What's the best way to get in? How do you get from here to there? Where's court 4? Just stuff like, just having somebody like that who has seen it all, I think is helpful. And that's an encouraging step. If I'm a North Carolina fan, seeing that happen, that would make me think, here's somebody who clearly knows the type of people he needs around him to make this work. I like the move, to echo what you said. All right. I think that's enough for a Friday morning. You think that's enough for a Friday morning?
I think that's enough for a Friday morning.
All right. Before I get you out of here, let me ask you how you're feeling, because I know you weren't feeling so well at the Final Four. You're doing better. You look good.
Thanks. Yeah. The left side of my mouth has been better. I'm counting down the hours to a root canal. Like, I've never been more excited to get a root canal. It hurts to eat, crushing extra strength ibuprofen. My Final Four was saved by the fact that my dentist called in a prescription that I literally jogged across downtown Indianapolis to get before the Walgreens shut down. But yeah, we're doing all right. We're hanging in there. The medicine ran out last night, so I got to make it until Tuesday. Knock on wood, we're feeling okay as of now. But it could get dicey here over the next 96 hours or so.
How does vodka work as a numbing as a numbing tool for teeth?
GP, I quite literally went and bought White Lightning moonshine just in case. Like, I would never buy that otherwise. I would never buy it otherwise. But I was like, we might have to get innovative here down the stretch.
Here comes that Southern man coming out in you. You done got you a bottle of moonshine. Every man in the South got to have a bottle of moonshine in the cabinet.
But you helped me out. You hooked me up. Your guy, Dr. Medi's gonna hook me up with a new prescription if things deteriorate here over the next couple of days. So I've got the systems in place to make it to the finish line. So we're getting there. All right, buddy. Well, that's good to hear. Hang in there. If you need the moonshine, text me. I'll pour me a little shot. I'll drink moonshine with you tonight if you need me. All right. Okay. Appreciate that. That's what a real teammate would do. Appreciate that. Hey, the season's over. I can open a bottle of moonshine on a Friday night if I want to. All right. The season's over. All right. So text me if you need me. I'm glad you're feeling better. Let's get out of here. Shouts to Devin Downey. Shouts to Chester, South Carolina. Terry Teagle's a legend. Huck and Larnell. Thank you guys once again for watching, listening to the Eye on College Basketball Podcast. If you're not subscribed, please go subscribe anywhere you subscribe to pods. Apple, Spotify, more of us than there are of them. That should be reflected in the comments. So do that. We'll talk to you again real soon. Till then, take care.